if I tell you, Les Bowen, all right, the Eagles got Calvin Ridley, Hassan Reddick, and Kaiser White, you'd
Yeah.
probably say that's pretty good. Fair
Yeah,
or
and if
not
they'd
fair?
gotten one of those two, Reed or the other safety, Williams, Marcus Williams, that they tried to get, you'd say they did everything that they hoped to do, and they're probably going to be, a co-favorite with Dallas for the division title. But they haven't.
Mac guys here on verse 365. We are joined by one of our favorite guests. Les Bowen joins us. Les, any truth to the rumor that the reason why you weren't full-time on the Eagle beat this year was because you thought John McMullen was going to give you COVID, and now that the NFL has dictated that COVID is over and no longer exists, that's why you're back in the fold as a regular beat guy?
Sure, that's it. Yes.
Nobody was tested more than me, Jody. I was the safest person in the history of mankind. I had to get tested every day that first year, Les. Every stinking day.
Wow.
So I was the safest person you could be around. But they keep pulling you back in, NJ.com. Congratulations on the new gig. And I wanna start there because you wrote a piece about Eagles' future isn't now, and Howie Roseman talks up the draft. I was a little surprised the way Howie spun this offseason, especially the way around the league that things have been going for the NFC. You've seen this massive shift of star players going to the AFC. The AFC looks like a murderer's row. The NFC, yeah, you still have Tom Brady's back, but Tampa Bay's taking some hits. Aaron Rodgers is taking some hits. Devontae Adams, most notably. Aaron Rodgers, you have the Super Bowl champions. The larger point, though, Les, there aren't a lot of great teams in the NFC. Why are the Eagles soft pedaling this whole thing in the "we're not ready" sentiment that seems to be so prevalent in the Delaware Valley?
Yeah, I don't know if I wasn't surprised by it, but it comes from a few things. One is that they haven't been able to do everything they wanted to do this offseason. The Calvin Ridley thing, I think, was a pretty big deal that they didn't get done because he got suspended by the NFL for gambling. So they haven't added a difference-making wide receiver, which everybody thought would be a huge priority for them this offseason. They did add an edge rusher in Hassan Reddick. They've added a starting linebacker on a one-year deal, Kazir White. But safety, they brought back Anthony Harris, which I don't think was anything they really wanted to do. And they brought back, as Jody mentioned, Derek Barnett, which I'm pretty sure they didn't really want to do, but they kind of felt like it's cheap and he knows the system and, depth and all that stuff. But it's not very exciting. And I think that was Howie's the spin Howie wants to put on it is that it's really about the draft, which I think is ultimately true. I mean, that's when you have 3 first-round picks and 5 in the first 100, and you have a team that just barely squeaked into the playoffs with a pretty easy schedule and then got manhandled when it got to the playoffs. I think that's a realistic appraisal of where they are, but could they be somewhere better? If they had Ridley, if they'd gotten one of those safeties, yeah, they could be, and we might be sitting in November thinking, boy, things have kind of gone backwards this year. And, they're playing a lot of young guys, but it sure would have been nice to have gotten those pieces that they didn't get in the offseason and maybe be leading the NFC East or something. It's hard to know right now how that's going to go. But he did talk about one thing I was really interested in. He talked about these guys are going to play, these guys that they draft.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often heard general managers go exactly the opposite way. When you have a really good team, you talk about the draftees, not playing right away and you're drafting for the future and you're not really, expecting these guys to run out there and, save your team day one. He's kind of you know, he's kind of like, well, we've got to keep some holes open for our draftees, which I don't know that I've ever heard an Eagles general manager say that before. So it was kind of remarkable. The session was in a couple different ways.
Well, what I liked, and now we'll see if it actually plays out that way, is the fact that he used the word redshirt. You got picks in the top 20. You don't want to redshirt him and redshirt him and redshirt the other guy. So we'll see if it actually goes that way. But I want to go back, and it's probably going to be a little bit of a semantical debate, but you included in your article today, Les. The fact that Howie Roseman, in explaining the entire offseason, included the fact that they got a contract extension done with Mailata during the year, and they got one done with Josh Sweat during the year, and they got Devontae Maddox signed to an extension, and they got Dallas Goedert locked up. All four very good moves, but just in my mind, I add that to the 2022 season, to 2021 season. It was done in 2021, and when you, at the end of the year, add up the tab and see what kind of a year Howie Roseman had, because he got those contracts done, I would say, and oh, by the way, Eagles went from 4-11-1 to 9-8 and making the playoffs. 2021 was a banner year for Howie Roseman. Good job, Mr. General Manager. And then you draw the line. The season ends. Your roster is frozen. You draw the line, and now we start to evaluate again. Howie kind of wants to dip back into 2021 and say, yeah, but if I hadn't signed them, they would have been free. Okay, but you did. You got them signed. Am I drawing the line in a fair place to say, Howie, listen, I give you credit for 2021. That was a really good year for you, but we've started a new year in 2022. Can't go back and claim victories from 2021 and apply them to 2022. Am I being fair in the way I look at it?
Yeah, I think you are, Jody. This is spin. This is more deflection of what hasn't happened in free agency. It certainly is important that they did those things. You can't argue with the need to re-sign those players and the fact that that does help set a foundation going forward. But it's not anything that's really, it's not an addition to anything. It's just kind of keeping what you had, and it doesn't really play into any narrative about the off season of 2022. As you said, it's kind of neither here nor there.
Yeah, the time frame, though, to play a little bit of a devil's advocate, and I do think there were a ton of contradictions in that press conference as a whole, but I will say the timing. And I look at it this way, Les. If the Eagles didn't identify these particular players early like they typically do, and they've really done since, Joe Banner was here, that's how they do business. They identify who they want. They strike early to get the best deals possible. If they went the other direction and Jordan Mailata played like Jordan Mailata played, they probably got to put the franchise tag on him, to be honest. If they don't want to lose them. And then they work out things from there. Josh Sweat would have got a big deal. Dallas Goedert would have got a huge deal. In fact, they would have been having that discussion. Who do we put the franchise tag? Jordan Mailata or Dallas Goedert? Devontae Maddox would have been one of the better slot corners, which is not a highly paid position. So I guess my point is, if the Eagles did do that, people would have been more excited that they would have had to pay more to get these players back, but they would have felt better because they happened in the off season. So I will give Howie some credit for identifying. And then you add in the Calvin Ridley move, as you mentioned. If I tell you, Les Bowen, all right, the Eagles got Calvin Ridley, Hassan Reddick, and Kaiser White, you'd probably say that's pretty good. Fair or
if
not
they'd
fair?
gotten one of those two, Reed or the other safety, Marcus Williams, that they tried to get, you'd say they did everything that they hoped to do, and they're probably going to be, a co-favorite with Dallas for the division title. But they haven't. Those things aren't there. And
I just find the perceptions change with the timing. What Jody was saying, the perceptions change dramatically with the
timing.
draft
is going to reset the table pretty dramatically, John. 3 first-round picks, even if they trade one of them away for something, there's going to be a lot of focus on that and a lot of hype around that. And they really ought to, if they stick to the draft parameters that they used last year, I really think, they're in a pretty good mode right now of not reaching for, crazy things like they've done in the past. They really ought to be able to capitalize on this bounty of draft picks. And their defense, I don't know if fans really understand, their defense is old in the key positions. It was not a bad defense last year. It was much better than it had, down the stretch than it started out the year and maybe was before. But the key players are over 30, and you can't, you're not building with over 30 guys. You need to replace, or at least, you need 3 or 4 really good young players added into this mix. And, I think they're going to do that. I think you'll see an edge rusher. I think you'll definitely see a safety and a corner, out of this draft in the first few rounds. And I think that's going to become the narrative of the offseason, whether it's really going to change their fortunes in 2022 or not. I think the draft is going to kind of take the onus off of Howie for quite a while, assuming he doesn't do something crazy and draft players that nobody wants,
And it might not have been on draft day. Sometimes it is actually on draft day. We decide a couple of years down the road that we, in 2020 hindsight, said, what the hell was Howie thinking in the first round?
Yes.
And I'll give Howie this much credit. He didn't take credit for Fletcher Cox, who also was a free agent.
Yeah.
For about an hour and a half before he got him re-signed. You could have put that in the win column too, Howie. Yeah. If we're going to go back 6 months to when you did an extension for a guy like Jordan Mailata and call that a W, why not take a victory lap on Fletcher Cox? He was a free agent who you brought back at $14 million, which I'm sure I'm not sure that he's worth it. But again, I'm getting off course here. All right, Les Bowen. So if they're going to use, we'll only use 2. They may use all 3. Mm-hmm. They may trade down in the first round, which would still count for a first-round draft pick, but it would change the dynamic if they're down in the lower 20s because the team wants to move up and, say, take a quarterback. I don't know. What positions are they going to take? And I know we still got a month to go before they get there. There's still free agents out there. But listening to Howie yesterday, it sounded like the Eagles aren't close on doing anything else, either free agency and or trade to fill a positional need. Where do you think he's going to go? If players have values at that spot, and the Eagles can, as Howie alluded to yesterday, pick players who can come right in and play because they don't want to redshirt anybody. What are the 2 main positions that the Eagles will be looking to fill in the first round of the draft?
Well, I hope they don't really approach it quite that way. I don't want to ever draft by position. I mean, you want to see when you get to that first pick that you have, you want to see what's on the board. And if there's even if it's, let's say tight end is a position where they're really loaded pretty well, but if the greatest tight end in the history of football is sitting there, you take him. But, that having been said, I think the 2 things I would like to see would be a wide receiver and a corner. First of all, really difference makers at those positions, and a safety sometime in the first couple rounds, certainly. Be nice, like second round, and get like somebody like that Brian Dawkins guy that they drafted a while.
They can only get that in the second round.
Those are positions that I'm looking at primarily. The edge rusher will definitely be right up there. That might be their first pick. That's where it's going to be. It's not going to be a running back or probably not a quarterback. We assume that would be something, wouldn't it? If Howie goes with Malik Willis at 16 or something, But, I think you're going to see defense. I think you're going to see wide receiver. Those are their priorities.
Well, let's talk about it. That would be something. I don't think you have to worry. I think Malik Willis is going to be, how
Gone.
Quarterbacks, he'll be top 10. But, the other guys, there's at least a slight possibility. One of the interesting tidbits to Nick Sirianni this morning, at the coach's breakfast, which is evidently no longer a breakfast. They're just at a podium now. But he mentioned Jalen Hurts was working with somebody in Southern California, which is a change for him. So
Yeah.
They shifted, and clearly they're concerned about the accuracy. That's what what they want him to improve. And then he kind of talked, Howie kind of talked about the targets yesterday, about the receivers and the style of offense the Eagles were running, and the contradiction of we need more targets for Devontae.
Yeah,
Smith
he wants Devontae Smith to get the ball. That was pretty clear. Yeah.
Yeah. And I put this all in the bow thinking about where Jalen Hurts is in his career, and he's very cost effective right now. But that's about to change. The Eagles he's going to be up for an extension after this season. And we all see the cost of business of doing business at the quarterback position. Do you see a shift in this league? Sort of, I've described it as a college-like mentality where you got 4 years with a guy or 5 years with a red shirt. Do you keep trying to turn it over because you don't want to pay that big money to the Derek Carr level quarterbacks or the Kirk Cousins level quarterbacks? Because that's what you got to pay when a quarterback gets to that second deal if they're an above average player.
Hadn't thought about it that way, but you're right. However, that is still the holy grail. I mean, that position, Jody, right before I came on, Jody was talking about the Rams and how Aaron Donald is their best player. Well, yes, but they've had Aaron Donald for several years. How many Super Bowls did they win with Aaron Donald until they exchanged Jared Goff for Matt Stafford, who makes a ton of money? You don't want to get stuck paying $40 million a year to a mediocre quarterback. And, that's going to be – they're going to have to make a decision on Jalen Hurts. You're right. And this is going to be the year. We're either going to know at the end of this year whether they consider him the guy that's going to win the Super Bowl here, or they're going to draft or trade for or sign somehow a quarterback, in 2023. You don't want to get stuck in that situation. They made the wrong call on Carson Wentz, as it turned out. Nobody thought so at the time. I don't think anybody, when he signed that contract, thought, "Oh my God,
everybody thought it was Team Bradley, really."
But that is a big deal. Now we're looking at the cap, though. Everybody says there's going to be this cap explosion in 2023. Maybe it won't be quite like that. I just don't know. It is a fascinating discussion, and I don't know where it's going, but it is the most important piece, and you can get stuck paying, a huge chunk of your cap to somebody who's not going to get you there. And you don't want to be in that position. That is exactly right.
All right. This question is for both you guys. And Les, please, I want your answer, John. Shame on me. I should have gotten it out of you earlier in the show. Part of what Howie said yesterday when he was defending the Derek Barnett signing was that we want to have a wave defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
What does he mean by wave defensive line?
I guess he means he wants depth. He wants to be able to shuffle people in and just, be able to not have the intensity go down when he brings in the second unit, which is something they had years ago. And that was, a big part of their success years ago was being able to sub in, the second unit and still get pressure on the quarterback and not be, biting their fingernails on the sideline because, they've got to give it's like when Doc Rivers sits out Embiid and, the lead goes from 19 points to 4 in 3 minutes.
In 10 seconds.
You don't want to, you don't want that. So they think Barnett's a guy. Clearly, they're not looking at Barnett as a starter right now. And I think if Barnett ends up starting, that'll be a real kind of flashing red light about where we are. But, they're looking at Barnett to come in, and I think he was trying to reassure fans that they didn't re-sign Derek Barnett thinking, oh boy, we're set now. You know,
Yeah.
I think they want to bring Derek Barnett off the bench maybe and think they'll get more out of him. You know, if he's playing fewer snaps and just charging straight ahead, maybe he'll take fewer penalties if he's not on the field as much.
Well, that,
you know,
percentage wise.
Can he take a penalty from the bench? I think that's really the question.
It's always
somebody
him,
runs out of
it's
bounds
always
in front of
him.
him.
If anybody can do it, Derek Barnett can do it.
Yeah, it's always him. Nick Sirianni started that. Remember?
Yes, he did.
By mouthing that. So, but Les is right. It's a rotational position, defensive line. So the last thing you want to be is in the fourth quarter where you got to rush the passer and everybody's dog tired. So everybody wants that wave sort of where you can just roll in guys and they're still effective and they're able to go after the pass rusher. But one thing Nick also addressed this morning, Les, was the receiver position. And he said Zach Pass was going to have a role, which is not going to excite many people. But Quez Watkins is an interesting player to me because I probably talked to you about this before. I've talked to other people. He's one of those guys where the fan base seems to be skipping steps. They think, all right, he's a solid player. I'm not comfortable with Quez Watkins as my wide receiver too. Where are you with Quez Watkins?
I want to see a lot more from him. It's I think fans get excited because he catches one of those long balls, but we've seen a couple years of that, and it doesn't seem to translate into consistent, solid production. I'm not enough of a technician to really know if it's route running or, focus or exactly what keeps him from being, a guy that can constantly produce rather than give you these flashes of, wow, look at that, could be the quarterback, and I think that was one kind of implication of what Howie was talking about yesterday about the targets. I think they want Jalen Hurts to get the ball to these guys a little more than he has, rather than taking off with it or dumping it off or, I don't know. Quez Watkins you're right. I do think the fan base kind of overrates him a little bit in terms of what he has accomplished to this point. And I'd like to know more. We haven't been inside a locker room since Quez Watkins was drafted. And I'd love to talk to the guy and know what he's doing this offseason and see what he thinks he needs to work on and what he's done, to get better. But these are things that in a normal setup, like we had 4 or 5 years ago, we'd have a much better handle on right now than I do sitting here at this moment. But you're right. That's one of those things where people kind of assume, stuff that hasn't been proven yet.
Guys, I'll ask you both because you're both beat reporters for the Philadelphia Eagles. Is it a foregone conclusion that you're going to be back in the locker room last year? John
this
likes
year.
the kid that
this year.
This year. I mean, coming up in 2022. John likes
That
the kid
everything we've heard from our Writers Association and so forth is that will be the case. I don't think the league. This is a different sport in that there's so many players, and the league PR staffs having to trot players, grab players out of training rooms and stuff and trot them out in front of, to a tent or something in a wave of, half a dozen or 8 or, this guy's leaving, this guy's coming. They need the whole, instead of having one person sort of stand in the locker room and watch us circulate, they have to have like 4 people monitoring comings and goings every time they do a media thing. If there's no locker room, you know what I'm saying? There's so many moving parts. I don't think the teams are resistant to opening up the locker rooms in the sense that I don't think the media relations staffs want to keep doing this relay race thing where they're bringing people in and out all the time. And it's, 45 minutes of chaos for them. So I do think we'll be back in the locker rooms, and we'll see, who knows what the next variant is or what the heck's going to happen at this point. But right now, I think we're looking at a pretty normal year. But I did want to say one thing about my gig. I I'm not really doing this to be a beat writer again. The thing that attracted me about it is I'm writing columns for NJ.com.
Okay.
I'm doing it as a freelance writer. I'm not really an employee. I have a contract, but that's something I've always wanted to do and never really got to do in all of my years of coverage, is consistently write columns, opinion pieces about, where things are going and what's, give a little more personality, a little more of myself in there. Sometimes I did it whether I was supposed to or not, especially back in the daily news days. But,
yeah,
I'm officially, these are columns. And that was kind of what, more than money or anything else, that was what attracted me to this. And I'm pretty excited about it. I'm doing it a couple times a week. And, I'm kind of like a retired guy. I'm kind of straddling that gray area of, I still want to be center stage, but I don't really want to work hard.
Yeah. And it's a good bit because Chris Franklin does a great job with NJ.com, yes. Friend of the show, always on. And Les is doing a good job as a columnist, who we love as well. And it's always good to see Les at the NovaCare complex when we get to see you, Les. But, one of the things you said there was, a word that struck me is normal. We're getting back to a more normal environment, and hopefully you're right. And I think as things go on right now, and there is no new variant, we're probably going to be back in the locker room. But I want to talk about that word normal in a different sense, because there was a shift really from the 2011 CBA and now even further to where I don't think a lot of fans realize, and Nick mentioned it today, you can't even talk football with these guys right now on the calendar year. You're not supposed to, which is kind of goofy. I don't know how you police that, but you get the point. They don't get as much time with the players in the offseason, the coaches, as they used to say the least, if you go back many, many years.
Right.
And a lot of these guys are left to their own devices in the offseason, and they get their personal coaches. And it seems like the really great players in the modern environment are the ones that take advantage of their downtime by themselves. The one thing Jalen Hurts has always done, tremendously hard worker, always trying to get better. And now, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, he shifted to working out in Southern California. Could be Jordan Palmer. I don't know where Tom House is. He work out of Southern California?
I do not know anymore. Yeah.
But clearly it's one of those accuracy guys. How important do you think that off-season work that nobody sees is important to this modern player?
Oh, it certainly is. And you're right. Peeling back the years to 2011, what I saw then was the Players Association wasn't able to get a lot money-wise or, economically out of that agreement. But the Players Association is dominated by veteran players, because you don't get in any job, you don't become a union guy, when you walk in the first day. It's all veterans who tend to be very near the end of their contracts, and they're always having a problem with the union president is always a guy who's like about to get cut because he's 35 years old. In fact, that's happened with J.C. Treader, who I don't think has a team right now.
No.
But they got for guys that have been around 8-10 years, they didn't like all the off-season stuff. They thought it had expanded too much, and there was too much that they had to, too much time at the facility they had to spend, too many workouts, too much, time that they didn't need as guys who had been around forever. And that was probably true for them. It isn't true for guys who are in their first, second, third years, and it's something that's just, it's something the union did that was a little bit short-sighted and a little bit skewed toward a certain group, of their constituency. And you're right. It's all about what you're able to do on your own with, whatever resources you have to get better on your own, because they can't Jonathan Gannon can't be telling Avonte Maddox anything about, how the defense is going to line up this year, or, what his role is going to be, or what he'd like to, they have those meetings at the end of the season. I guess Gannon gives him, I want you to work on this, and this, but then it's all up to Avonte Maddox. He either does it or he doesn't, and it is very different. You're right, than it was 15 years ago.
All right, last one from me. And I asked this of Mike Gill earlier, and I want you to take the answer in whatever direction you need to, because I've been accused of being a guy who can take a 2-word question and make it into a 2-paragraph question, maybe like I'm doing right here. Jeff Lurie last year uttered the phrase transitional in describing the upcoming 2021 season, and we clung to it, and we revisited it on almost every turn during the course of the season. Jeff is supposed to speak today for the first time in almost 14 months. What phrase, if it's just one word, great. If you think it's a sentence, great. You got to take a paragraph to describe it. What will Jeff Lurie give us today as what we should be looking for to describe the 2022 Eagles?
Well, Howie really stuck on the phrase building yesterday. And I guess I think you might hear that. I'm not, with Jeffrey, it's hard to predict Jeffrey. I mean,
he might talk about his Oscar. Yeah, he might talk about his Oscar. He might talk about Ukraine. He might talk. He's going to talk about what he wants to talk about.
That's exactly right. But I think the message from the organization is going to be building, patience. They know they don't have the horses in the stable. And we might be hearing something different. Again, if they'd gotten Calvin Ridley in that safety, we might be hearing a different tone. If they'd been able to convince, a certain quarterback who went, who was in Seattle last season to come east, I think we'd be hearing something very, very different.
That's very true.
Russell Wilson is in Denver and not here, and he didn't consider any Eastern teams. But yeah, I think we're gonna hear that they're kind of a work in progress, and people should be excited about these draft picks and so on and so forth. But it's with Jeffrey, it's always interesting with Jeffrey. I wish we got more chances. You don't want an owner like Jerry Jones, who comes out at the end of every game and second guesses the coaching staff and the players, but you would like to be able to check in with the owner at crucial times when things are going real well or real badly. You'd like to have an idea of what the owner is thinking. And you don't really, Jeffrey wants to stay, out of the limelight until his 1 or 2 times a year that he wants to talk. And that's convenient for him. It's not great for fans and media.
Yeah.
Well, we are glad that we're going to have more than once or twice a year with Les Bowen going forward. Looking forward to reading you at NJ.com. John is looking forward to sitting next to you in the press box because he says you're not a food glutton like some of the other Eagle beat writers, and that will leave extra food for him. So, Les, appreciate you coming on board. Looking forward to all your Eagle columns this upcoming year and whenever you hop on Birds 365 with us.
Well, thank you, guys.
Our pleasure. Les Bowen here with us. Not a beat writer, but an Eagle columnist. He wanted to make sure we knew exactly what to look for the Les in this upcoming year. Whatever it is will be good because Les is good like he is whenever he comes on Birds 365 with us. All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, Mac and Mac, guys, we're going to come back. Shockingly, we're going to put a bow on the show.